good. Nice. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, entitled Purusha Sukta Confirmed, Text 12. Text 12, Chapter 6 of Canto 2 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm assuming that the recording's on.
Yes, it's done.
Srimad Bhagavatam, it's a follow-up book to Bhagavad Gita as it is. And so,
what text was it again?
Text 12. Did we do Om Namo Bhagavate?
Oh yeah, we did.
We did. Rainam Namaskritya Naram Charvanottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tatojayam Udhiraya. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Gata Narayan, to Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Put this down a bit. Nasta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavad Utamash Loke Bhakti or Bhavati. Nice, Tiki. Okay. So text 12, chapter 6, canto 2 of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is a verse spoken by Lord Brahma, the engineer of the universe, to his disciple Narada Muni. It's being narrated by Shukadeva Goswami speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, and that's being narrated by Sutta Goswami speaking to the sages at Namaisharanya, headed by Shaunaka Rishi, and it's all being compiled and narrated by Srila Vyasadeva, the compiler of the Vedas. Dharmasya Mama Tubhyam Cha Kumaranam Bhavasya Cha Vijnanasya Cha Sattvasya Parasya Atma Parayanam Dharmasya Mamatubhyam Cha Kumaranam Bhavasya Cha Vijnanasya Cha Sattvasya Parasyatma Parayanam Dharmasya Mamatubhyam Cha Kumaranam Bhavasya Cha Vijnanasya Cha Sattvasya Parasyatma Parayanam Dharmasya Mamatubhyam Cha Kumaranam Bhavasya Cha Vijnanasya Cha Sattvasya Parasyatma Parayanam
Dharmasya Mamatubhyam Cha Kumaranam Bhavasya Cha Vijnanasya Cha Sattvasya Parasyatma Parayanam
Dharmasya Mamatubhyam Cha Kumaranam Bhavasya Cha Vijnanasya Cha Sattvasya Parasyatma Parayanam.
On internet, would someone like to recite?
Dharmasya mamatubhyam cha
Dharmasya
Maranam bhavasya cha
Kumaranam Bhavasya cha
Vijnana Sattvasya
Vijnanasya
Sattvasya
Parayanam
Parasyatma Parayanam
Dharmasya cha
Dhammasya
Maranam Bhavasya cha
Kumaranam Bhavasya
Yacha Sattvasya
Jnana
Sattvasya
Parasyatma Parayanam
Parasyatma
Parayanam
Dhammasya Mamatubhyam cha
Dharmasya
Matubhyam cha
Kumaranam Bhavasya cha
Kumaranam Bhavasya cha
Jnanasya cha Sattvasya
Vijnanasya cha Sattvasya
Parasyatma Parayanam
Parasyatma Parayanam
Dharmasya mama tubhyam cha
Dharmasya Matubhyam cha
Maranam bhavasya cha
Kumaranam Bhavasya cha
Yasya cha sattvasya
Vijnanasya cha Sattvasya
Parasyatma parayanam
Parasyatma Parayanam. Anyone else would like to chant? This is Canto 2, Chapter 6, Text 12 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. I think you're on mute. Cyril, I think you're on mute. Yeah, you can unmute him. And that's Priya.
Oh, oops. No. Oh, where is Cyril? I don't see Cyril. Okay.
There you go. I know you just put him on mute.
Maranam bhavasya cha Vigyasya cha Sattvasya Parayanam Parayanam
Parasyatma Parayanam. Dharmasya, of religious principles or of Yamaraj. Mama, mine. Tubhyam, of yours. Cha, and Kumaranam, of the four Kumaras. Bhavasya, Lord Shiva, Cha, and also. Vijnanasya, of transcendental knowledge. Cha, also. Sattvasya, of truth. Rasya, of the great personality. Atma, consciousness. Parayanam, dependent. Translation. Also, the consciousness of that great personality is the abode of religious principles. Mine, yours, and those of the four bachelors, Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanat Kumar, and Sananda. That consciousness is also the abode of truth and transcendental knowledge. And then there's no purport there, so I'll go to the next verse is actually a series of 4 verses. I'll read through the Sanskrit. If anyone wants to chant along with me, you're welcome to do so. Aham bhavan bhavaschaiva tahi me munayograja sura sura nara naga kagamiga sarishriha gandharva raso yaksha rakshobuta gatorga ashava pitara siddha Idyascharanatruma Anyesha Livida Jiva Jalastava Okasa Gaharcha Kitamastaras Gadipasta Vidava Sarvam Purusha Evedam Bhutam Bhavyam Bhavashaya Tene Dhammavitam Vishvam Vitasvim Aditishtatim. Translation is,
beginning from me, Brahma, down to you and Baba, Shiva, all the great sages who were born before you, the demigods, the demons, the nagas, the human beings, the birds, the beasts, as well as the reptiles, etc., and all phenomenal manifestations of the universes, namely the planets, stars, asteroids, luminaries, lightning, thunder, and the inhabitants of the different planetary systems, namely the Gandharvas, Apsaras, Yakshas, Rakshas, Bhutaganas, Urgas, Pashus, Pitas, Siddhas, Vidyadharas, Charanas, and all other different varieties of living entities, including the birds, beasts, trees, and everything that be, are all covered by the universal form of the Lord at all times, namely past, present, and future, although he is transcendental to all of them, eternally existing in a form not exceeding 9 inches. Hare Krishna. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his partial representation measuring not more than 9 inches as supersoul, expands by his potential energy in the shape of the universal form, which includes everything manifested in different varieties of organic and inorganic materials. The manifested varieties of the universe are therefore not different from the Lord, just as golden ornaments of different shapes and forms are non-different from the original stock reserve of gold. In other words, the Lord is the supreme person who controls everything within the creation, and still he remains the supreme separate identity, distinct from all manifested material creation. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, texts 4 and 5, he is therefore said to be Yogeshwar. Everything rests on the potency of Lord Sri Krishna, and still the Lord is different from and transcendental to all such identities. In the Vedic Purusha Shukta of the Rig mantra, this is also confirmed. This philosophical truth of simultaneous oneness and difference was propounded by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and it is known as Achintya Veda Veda Tattva. Brahma, Narada, and all others are simultaneously one with the Lord and different from the Supreme Lord. We are all one with him, just as the gold ornaments are one in quality with the stock gold, but the individual gold ornament is never equal in quantity with the stock gold. The stock gold is never exhausted, even if there are innumerable ornaments emanating from the stock, because the stock is Purnam, complete. Even if Purnam is deducted from the Purnam, still the supreme Purnam remains the same Purnam. This fact is inconceivable to our present imperfect senses. Lord Chaitanya therefore defined his theory of philosophy as achintya, inconceivable, and as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, as well as in the Bhagavatam, Lord Chaitanya's theory of achintya Veda Veda Tattva is the perfect philosophy of the absolute truth. Om Purnam Om Gyanatimmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurad Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svaya Rupa Kadamaya Darati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapara Shri Guru Vaishnavam Sastram Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaragnatam Vidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakanditam Stram Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kancana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatayugyascha Kripa Sindhu Gyaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vatsari Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Hare Krishna. So this series of verses, it's focusing on what's called the super soul or Paramatma feature of the Supreme. Hare Krishna. It's described earlier in the Bhagavatam that Srinvatam Swakata Krishna Punyashravana Kirtan Vidyantastoya Bhajani Vidunoti Sharitsatam. Sri Krishna, who is the personality of Godhead, the super soul, who is the super soul, or Paramatma, like we are the Atma, and then Paramatma means the supreme Atma, the source of all Atmas. Sri Krishna, who is the Paramatma super soul in the heart of all living entities, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses the heart from material desire for the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. And so, so this describes the super soul existing in the region of the heart, existing in the form not exceeding 9 inches. There's a place where it describes kind of like the size of the thumb. So that would be, well, you might like for an ant or an amoeba, it would be like whatever the size of the amoeba thumb. And here it says not exceeding 9 inches. So the verse in Prabhupada's purport stresses this philosophy of achintya beta beta tattva. It's a phrase, it's a Sanskrit phrase that describes that this is the philosophy of Vaishnavism. This is the philosophy of Bhakti. And so we ought to get to know it. And so it means simultaneous oneness and difference, but not just simultaneous oneness and difference, achintya, and that's stressed here. Achintya means inconceivable and simultaneous oneness and difference. Inconceivable means with our mundane mind and senses, we're not going to wrap our mind around the oneness and difference. We can look now, and for this whole principle of simultaneous oneness and difference, for me, it's a very helpful reference point, a helpful framework to understand different paradigms of life, different philosophies. Some philosophies, you might say, overemphasize the difference, and some philosophies focus on the oneness without acknowledging the difference. But we hear a lot about the non-personalism, the impersonalism, Mayavad. So those are philosophies that the ultimate absolute truth is radical undifferentiated oneness, what's called Advaitavad. Dvaita, like we can see the English word two, duo, okay, two, and so Advaita means non-dual, and Vad means truth, means the ultimate truth is just undifferentiated oneness, radical undifferentiated oneness. So there's a sense in which that's true. At the same time, it's not complete. It's not complete. You know, that there are, depending on one's perspective, one realizes a spiritually sincere person, one endeavoring for God realization, realizes God, the absolute, in 3 phases, in 3 aspects. And you might say a foundational phase is Brahma Gyoti. That's the oneness. And that's a beginning. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Brahmano hi pratishtam. That Krishna says he is the basis, he's the foundation, he's the source of the Brahman, of that oneness. And so So this Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva philosophy, it includes and transcends. It includes oneness and transcends it. It transcends it because it also includes transcendental variegatedness, transcendental form, transcendental personality. So as we've discussed, okay, it's one thing to realize the oneness of everything. At the same time, okay. So it's one thing to see the illusion and falsity of material duality, okay? But then there's spiritual activity, there's spiritual thought, there's spiritual dancing, there's spiritual eating, there's spiritual cooking, there's spiritual communication. And if we neglect that, then we're denying the propensity of ourselves as eternal persons. Our nature is to eternally be persons. Yes, we want to cleanse the heart of our material false ego, and we want to rise above material false conception of personhood. Material conception of personhood is like thinking we're that person in the dream, or thinking we're a person in a virtual reality type of video electronic game. That's not the real person, but there is a real person. There is a real person, right? So like as spirit souls, we're looking to be satisfied and fulfilled through relationships. Ananda bliss comes through relation. So there's so much frustration in material relationships. So we think, oh, so spiritual life means no relationships. It's kind of like, well, Prabhupada gives the example of like, it could be an animal or a human looking for water in the desert. And it sees a mirage, and the mirage looks like an oasis with a lake and a pond, and so it runs, and it runs, and then it gets exhausted. Oh, but the mirage is just 100 yards that way. Oh, it's not there, just 100 yards that way. And there's no water there. And so the animal or human dies because there's no water. But there is water. So we can say, that's it. The truth is there's no water. No, there is water. But it's not in the desert. We'll continue. So desert means material life. Desert means material life. So sort of a philosophy that says the oneness is the be all and end all, and there's nothing more than that. It's kind of denying that water exists. No, water exists. It just doesn't exist in the desert. It doesn't exist. The soul will not be fulfilled in trying to get fulfillment and satisfaction through the temporary contact of the senses with the sense objects, whether it's gross senses or the subtle material senses. Gratification for the subtle senses are like things like
Flirting,
adoration, distinction. I'll be famous. I'll be well known. I'm better than that. All that. These are subtle forms of sex desire, actually. Yeah. So okay. So we're one with God in a sense. Prabhupada gives the example of like a little gold ring is one with the gold mine, right? Because it's made of the same stuff. So that spirit souls were made of the same stuff. Such Chidananda, Vigraha, eternally full of bliss and knowledge, in eternal personhood, were made of the same stuff as Krishna. At the same time, the gold mine is different than the gold ornament, different in quantity. Gold mine is limitless. Cyril put on the chat the Om Pranam verse. That's the invocation verse from Sri Ishopanishad. Om, it's an important verse in Vaishnavism. Prabhupada quotes it a lot. Om Purnam Adha Punamidam Purna Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. So that verse talks about how everything is perfect and complete, okay, including the material world. It's a perfect and complete arrangement for our self-realization, for all living entities, a perfect and complete arrangement to maintain the body. Of course, you know, it is said, this as the saying goes, there's enough for man's need, there's not enough for man's greed. Like that. So the example is given like, okay, there's plenty of food for the birds, and let's say a truck is going and a truck drops a big bag of grain on the street. Right, so a bird might come and fill up its belly and leave. But then the human tendency, if we're not trusting Om Pranamana Purnamidam, the human tendency is, and we're seeing that now, right? The supermarket, like there's plenty of supply, there's an abundant supply of everything. But like, oh, there's this pandemic and quarantine and like that. So then let's hoard.
Toilet paper.
Yes, for example. So the human tendency will be, oh, I will take all of this grain. And then there won't be enough for others, including the birds. That's the human tendency, not trusting perfection and completeness. So perfect, complete arrangement for self-realization. And self-realization means getting how I'm one with God and how I'm different. And so we are eternally distinct persons, right? We never become the supreme personality of Godhead. We are like the gold trinkets that come from the gold. We're like the rays of the sun, but we're not the sun globe. Okay? So there's an important sense in which we're different. As far as, okay, like philosophies that overemphasize the difference. I remember when I was studying like in Isha Torah, the Ir Atika, the old city of Jerusalem. It's a yeshiva in the heart of, and the idea was kind of like God's so far away that you shouldn't even say the name of God. So instead say Hashem.
Shamasunda.
Yeah. Hashem Asunda. Yadavaya. So okay, so God's so far away that maybe God made this world, but now he doesn't care. Just like a watchmaker makes a watch and then it goes on. So God is so far away, and he's very near as well. He's in our heart. He's in our heart. I find, and the bridge to bridge that separation is bhakti, is serving with love and devotion. It doesn't bridge the separation in the sense of we become Krishna, but the bridge is loving devotional service. And then we become one with God in desire. That's Vaishnava, that's bhakti oneness. That our desires are 100% aligned with Krishna's desires. How do we know what are Krishna's desires? He tells us. And mainly he tells us through those, as we use that term, spiritual master, which can feel like a threatening, intimidating term for some master. And we can say teacher, terms like guru, spiritual master, they can have this mysticism attached to them. Okay, teacher. At the same time, not just any teacher, a teacher who's a true master in bhakti yoga. That's what a guru is. A guru is one who's, to use a negative term in a positive sense, a guru is one who's truly addicted to Krishna. Kiba Vipa Kiba Nyasi, say Guru Haya, Yay Krishna Tattva Veda, Sudra Kene Naya. I got it backwards there a bit, but whatever. So one who's realized in the science of Krishna, Yay Krishna Tattva, Hare Krishna. So we hear from Srila Prabhupada how to align our desires and our actions and our thoughts and our words and our relationships in service to Krishna. And then that's the bridge. That's the bridge. Okay. That's how me as a person, I can bridge that separation of God as a person, Krishna as a person, through loving devotional service. And then the achintya, the inconceivable, becomes realized. Inconceivable doesn't mean we can never understand anything. It doesn't mean that. Inconceivable means that that through processes of mundane speculation, processes of by my material calculation, my material speculation, I'm not going to go beyond a certain limiting 9 dots. But then I can never understand. No, there's a way to understand, and there's a different epistemology. The way to understand is not through our empirical efforts. It's opening up to trans-empirical, trans-cognitive realization. And that comes through loving devotional service. Just like if we, even if we want to get to know an equal, if we want to get to know each other, if I really want to get to know you closely and intimately, the process is not to analyze and study you. I might get some knowledge that way. But if I really want to get to know you, it means I gain your love and trust, and you choose to reveal yourself to me. That's the way to get to know an evolved conscious person. So what to speak of getting to know the supremely evolved conscious person. And then the inconceivable, then we realize the inconceivable in that way. We realize the inconceivable. We get realization about how we're one and how we're different with the Supreme Personality of God. Even this, okay. This is an interesting phrasing, which in the end of the translation, he is transcendental to all of them, eternally existing in a form not exceeding 9 inches. So for me, such statements are interesting because there's all this kind of like apparently ethereal, conceptual thing, then it goes really good, like very concrete, 9 inches. What? How's that? Okay, so for me, this illuminates that the Vedas are talking in terms of multi-dimensional space and time. It's an important point from my point of view. So just like, I remember back when I was growing up, where there was Carl Sagan, and he had, I think, a whole series of the Cosmos or something. And even Carl Sagan, he would talk about Vishnu and the Vedas, because you could see there was something there that wasn't like in Western religious texts. Talking about cycles of creation dating back hundreds of trillions of years. Carl Sagan, so he was a physicist, astronomer, and he would give the example of flatland, because he would give the example of different flatlanders. Okay, so a flatlander would be a being or a society of beings that could only conceive in 2 dimensions, length and width, no conception of height. Okay. And so let's say there's a ball, okay, 1 foot, 1 meter above the flatland. Now, they would have a conception of the ball. For them, the ball would look like maybe a dark line, because they couldn't see height. And if the ball would move, there would be this dark line that's moving. Now, we know that's just the shadow of the ball, like that. So, okay. So the Bhagavatam talks in multi-dimensions. So what? Oh, is that some sort of fairy tale, multi-dimensions? I only believe what I can see, and ridiculous statements like that. Like, I don't believe in this. I don't believe in this. I believe in science. If we look at all the scientific theories, it's all based on multi-dimensions. It's all based on accepting that there are dimensions of reality that our senses have no access to. Whether it's the singularity, the Big Bang, the theory of multiverse, string theory, they say, well, here's the mathematics of it. Here's the mathematics of it. And the mathematics defines that for string theory, there's 11 dimensions. We have access to 4: length, width, height, and time. And singularity, Big Bang, 14 dimensions, like that. So, right. So one sense we can say, oh, this is just primitive stuff like that. But actually, the Vedas talk about 14 time and space dimensions. Prabhupada, he would refer to Einstein's theory of relativity. And he would say Einstein kind of had the right idea, not necessarily that there's a direct parallel and correspondence between Einstein's conception of relativity of time, space, and density with the Vedas. But in principle, Prabhupada said Einstein has the right idea there. So there's many stories in the Bhagavatam about relativity of time, including Brahma Vimohan Lila in Krishna book, and the story of Manduka Muni, or the story of, getting all the names, and in the 9th canto there's a story of a king who went to visit Brahma to try to find a husband for his daughter, and then he came back, and it was just like hundreds of millions of years later, and all the princes he knew were long gone, and stuff like that. So, okay, so also yesterday you briefly mentioned about like the moon and things like that. And if we want to look at the Bhagavatam and Prabhupada's statements about moon and moon landing, it's if we want a total picture, we need to understand the multi-dimensional perspectives that the Bhagavatam goes in and out of. So the idea, whether we look at science or the Vedas or the Bhagavatam, there's dimensions to reality that our minds and senses have no access to. And of course, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is omnidimensionally interconnected. He's the source of all dimensional perspectives. And that's why it's described that the devotee, the pure devotee of Krishna, naturally has all mystic power. Mystic power means I don't understand it with my current mind and senses. It means I don't understand. And as we deepen our realization, expand our dimensional connectivity, then we can understand something. Okay? Just like, okay, I'm not claiming I have much understanding of this computer and all like that, but basically it's the age of communication and electronic technology. And so here we are, here we are, people from all around the globe like that. So let's say someone from 200 years ago, this would be a mystic phenomenon. But some of us have more, some of us has less understanding of the electronics here, but we basically have some basic understanding, so we don't say it's mystical. Okay. So Prabhupada talks about Yogeshvar in this verse. In the last verse in Bhagavad Gita, Sanjaya says, Yatra Yogeshvara Krishno Yatra Dano Yatra Parta Denordara Tatra Sri Vijaya Bhutir Dhruva Matir Mama. And so Sanjaya, who's really narrating the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, Sanjaya says, wherever there's Krishna, the supreme mystic, and Arjuna, the supreme archer, there will certainly be morality, victory, power, and opulence in extraordinary abundance. And so, so we enter into the inconceivable through the process of devotion. And that's what we enter into that mystic realm through the process of personal devotion. That's bhakti. And to do, because the situation that we got ourselves in material conditioned life, is we're here because we don't want to do bhakti, right? So that's why we can expect that it's not going to feel good or comfortable in some respects for our mind, for our senses, it's going to feel like an austerity. And and then as we more and more develop the param drishta nivartate, that higher taste that comes from service to Krishna, and then more and more we're naturally enthusiastic. This bhakti, it's always fulfilling for the soul and for the mind, senses, the ego. Because ego means like, I want to be the center. I want to be the controller. I want to be the most attractive. I want to be the most humble. I want you to see me as the most spiritual. Okay, like that. So rather than Krishna's the center. Krishna's pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada's the center. So that's bhakti. Lord Rishabhadev describes Nayam Dehoda Deha Bajam Viloke Kastan Kaman Hardik Vid Bujamye Tapu Divyam Puchaki Nisafam Shudya Yasmad Masu Sakyam Turnantam. He's talking to his sons, and he's saying, in this human form of life, don't settle for the type of gratification or so-called enjoyment that's available to pigs and dogs, to the stool eaters. Human life is meant to voluntarily, means get to, not have to, voluntarily do austerity, voluntarily forego immediate gratification of the mind and senses for the eternal, ever-expanding joy and bliss of the soul. So that's spiritual intelligence. And to the extent that we're sincere, we quoted a verse from the Bhagavatam towards the beginning of this class, Shrinatam Svakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanam. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam jadami guri yogam tam yena mamopayanti te. He says, to one who's sincere, I'll give you the intelligence by which you can come to me. It's like and there's no force. Krishna speaks the whole Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, and at the end he says, Yate chasita taku. He says, now do as you wish to do. Krishna will not interfere with free will. But love means voluntarily using our free will to serve another person with true affection. If there's force, there's no love. Krishna not saying to Arjuna, I don't care what you do. Krishna cares very much. He wants Arjuna to choose wisely. At the same time, fully respecting his self-determination. So if we're sincere, like if we have a micrometer of sincerity, Krishna will come 1,000 miles towards us. So he's not going to force. Krishna describes in the next verse of Bhagavad Gita. Teshame vanu kampartam ahamagyanatam ahamagyanajam tamahana shaimyatma bhavasto ganadipena basvata. Krishna says, I, dwelling in their hearts as the super soul, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. And so again, that's our exciting opportunity to co-create with Krishna the destruction of ignorance within our heart. And this verse emphasizes that super soul aspect. Krishna as Suridam Sarvabhutanam, Suridam Sarva Dehinam, as our best friend, right? Like Prabhupada would sign his letters, your ever well-wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. A.C. Bhakti, he wouldn't write Prabhupada, he would write A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Your ever well-wisher. Because Prabhupada, his only wish for us is that we connect with that highest guidance within, that we cleanse our heart and we connect with our best friend. We connect with our best friend, Krishna in the heart. And because that ignorance, that's the source of fear, that's the source of misery, that's the source of not accepting, not realizing Om Purnam Manha Purnaminam Purnam Mudachyate. And so that's how we can represent Prabhupada, by being true well-wishers of others, by supporting them, whether it's through prasad distribution, whether it's through deeply listening to them, whether it's through holding up the mirror in a lovingly challenging way about their deceptions, supporting others to connect with their best friend, the super soul in the heart. And will be potent and effective in that to the extent that we are living from that super soul connected consciousness. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Thank you all. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all. Yes, and I welcome, thanks for your presence. I welcome at this time if there are any questions, comments, or realizations anyone would like to ask. Or share. Eze.
So in the purport, it talks about Chaitanya's theory. I'm curious why it's described as a theory.
Okay, could you say that again?
Yes, so in the purport, Prabhupada talks about Chaitanya's theory. And I'm wondering why is it described as a theory?
Okay, yes. Okay, thanks for that. Lord Chaitanya therefore defined his theory of philosophy as achintya, inconceivable, and is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita as well as in the Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya's theory of achintya beta beta tattva is the perfect philosophy of the absolute truth. So what? So twice there, Prabhupada's using the term theory. And okay, so thanks for that question. Now, I don't have claim to clear realization of why Prabhupada uses that term. Here's my sense, though, because clearly Prabhupada, he's not lacking confidence or certainty, because he says this is the perfect philosophy of the absolute truth. We talked a few days ago about kind of like 8 states, starting from the Vedic stage, and then there was degradation, and then Buddha came, then Shankaracharya, and then 4 Vaishnavacharyas, and then Lord Chaitanya. There was a Vishishtadvaita and Shuddhadvaita. So Prabhupada describes it as perfect, and it's confirmed. So my understanding of what Prabhupada's doing there is he's talking as if like he's having an intellectual back and forth. He's having he's having a philosophical dialogue, and so he's deliberately using language that indicates a consciousness not coming from top down. Let's just say, sometimes, for sure, Prabhupada comes for, here it is, here's the fact, we are spirit, soul. But let's say, for example, let's imagine, and this is my understanding of Prabhupada's consciousness there. Let's say Prabhupada's speaking at a conference of philosophers, or an interfaith conference with Christian priests and Jewish rabbis and Buddhist scholars. Okay, so in order to communicate effectively to them so that they'll be receptive, he might sometimes go, yes, we are following the philosophy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that's called achintya beta beta tattva. And his conception, his theory, is that we are one with God, and simultaneously we're different. And we can get confirmation of this through ancient literatures like Bhagavad Gita. So when he's saying theory, he's not so much talking to us like we're his disciples. Sometimes he does that for sure, but sometimes he's talking like, okay, this is like a philosophical conversation. It's the philosophical conversation, and that's going to meet many people where they're at. And so that's my understanding of where Prabhupada's coming from with that word choice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eze. Thank you, Eze. Other questions or comments or realization?
Ramachandra.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I sort of like in connection to what Eza was what you were speaking about with Eza. I mean, I didn't went through all the conversations yet. I'm planning to at some point, but I did read like many of the conversations that I did read were about this like interfaith dialogues.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to observe like what you were saying, that Prabhupada, when he would speak with different faiths or religions or spiritual practices, he would not impose, in the sense that he would I think he would sense them where the at of being kind of like maybe a bit sectarian or not so inclusive.
Yeah.
And instead of giving them this feedback that, oh, it's this, everyone's philosophy, Lord Chaitanya is for everyone. It's not just a theory, it's everyone's factual living. He would go to like seemingly more sectarian place, but it allowed them to actually accept, at least in theory, what he was speaking about.
Right.
And it's really like a genius, I don't know to call it methodology or like strategy. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I appreciate Ezzy's question and your comment, Ramachandra, because it helps me to be more conscious here. Because this sort of approach in the conversation is just full of, but Prabhupada goes there a lot, and it's true. Like, because in the books, maybe there's more like I'm speaking to you as my student. But in the conversations, there's so much where it's just like, okay, well, let's consider this theory. Like he's talking to another philosopher, or he's talking to someone who's very, very deep in Shankaracharya philosophy, or he's talking to a Christian priests or ministers. And goes, yeah, so let's consider this point of view, and how is that convergent with yours, and how is it different? So he's kind of going there here, and it's more rare that he goes there in the books. I appreciate the discussion.
Yeah, so he's not basing his vision of them based on his own material conceiving. He sees them as a spiritual soul, that he's relating to them in that way, which is not necessarily conceivable by some like religious practice, for example. So he's serving them.
Yeah. Meeting them where they're at and serving their self-realization, coming closer to God. Thanks for that, Bhakti. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah.
Narayan.
The first verse we read, it was talking about the consciousness of the great personality is the abode of religious principles. Mine, yours. So it's Narada or Brahma speaking to Narada, right? So it's Brahma and the four Kumaras. And I was wondering if you could illuminate a little bit, because it seems like they're specifically like very special if their abode is the consciousness of the personality of Godhead. So maybe if you could explain a little bit like the four Kumaras' position in relation to that.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Yes, okay, I'll read that translation. Also, the consciousness of that great personality is the abode of religious principles, mine, yours, and those of the four bachelors, Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanat Kumar, and Sananda. That consciousness is also the abode of truth and transcendental knowledge. Okay, so this is kind of the end of the section where, in this chapter, Brahma is specifically describing about the universal form and how the rivers are the veins of the universal form of the Lord, and the mountains are the stacks of bones and things like that. And okay, so Narada is a son of Brahma, and the four Kumaras are also sons of Brahma, appearing at the dawn of creation. So they're very dear to him. And Brahma has other sons. He has other offspring, many. And this is just what's coming to me in response to your question, Narayan. So the four Kumaras and Narada
are especially dear to Brahma. All his children are dear, but they're especially dear because the other children, I mean, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, they were mostly meant for creating progeny and kind of praviti marg and getting reproduction going in the universe. And the four Kumaras specifically rejected them, and Brahma got angry with them. But ultimately, he got angry with them. But ultimately, he respected, like, they want to. He probably uses the word bachelors. He doesn't use brahmachari, for some reason. He uses the word bachelors. That's very interesting. And so Brahma has many children, and and they're expanding the progeny. Be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply. And so from here, this verse is highlighted how specially dear the four Kumaras and Narada, because the four Kumaras and Narada, they're Brahma's sons, and like they really get the ultimate goal. Like I'm just like not messing around with material energy. I'm not flirting with it. All five of them get that. So we can, so that's one thing, that of the sons, these five, of the children, these five are especially dear because they just get pure devotional service to Sri Vishnu, Sri Krishna, the person of God. That's it. We're not getting diverted or distracted, and we're sharing it with others. So the four Kumaras are the head of a whole parampara, sampradaya. Sampradaya means a party, like a political party. But in spiritual political party, there's synergy. There's not friction. There's appreciating. There's some differences in flavor. So when Brahma's describing this subtle part of the universal form, so he's saying, like, okay, like when we see any truly virtuous religious principles, when we see actual dedication to truth, and actual, not mundane, but divya gyan, transcendental knowledge, let that support us to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just when Rasoham Apsukanti, when we drink water, let the taste and the refreshment of water remind us of God. Pabasmi Sasisure, when we experience the light of the sun and moon, let this remind us of God. Okay, so whenever we see virtue, religious principles, let that remind us of the Lord. And particularly exemplary are the religious principles of Brahma, Narada, and the four Kumaras. So that tells me, kind of just of confirming what I understood you're indicating, Narayan, that these six personalities within our universe are really special, because their religious principles, there's nothing sectarian about it. Their religious principles is described right in the second verse of Bhagavatam. Dharma Pojita Kurtvatra Paramo Yamat Sardam Satam Vejam Vastavam Achavastu Shivda Tapo Charamulana. That this Bhagavatam, Brahma, the Kumaras, Narada Muni, they reject any religious principles that are materially motivated or materially mixed. To quote the great Janis Joplin, "Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? My friends all have Porsches. I must make amends," which I think is a brilliant illumination on let's call it the materialistic dark side of the Protestant work ethic, as defined by sociologists like Max Weber. Prabhupada commented on Max Weber commenting on the Vedas, and Prabhupada said, "What can Max Weber possibly know?" Because Max Weber had no devotion. What can he understand about the Vedas? But he had some brilliant sociological theories about the Protestant work ethic. So their religious principles for these six personalities, the four Kumaras, Narada Muni, and Brahma, they're getting to the essence of religion. The essence of religion is not about, do you belong to this? Are you a Buddhist? Do you root for this football team, that football team? Today I'm a Christian, last year I was a Hindu. That has nothing to do with, that's cheating religion. That real religious principles, It's about a change of heart, a transformation of heart from mundane and from ignorance, greed, lust, anger, envy, madness, to sweet, gentle devotion to God. Are our religious principles actually moving us to transformation of consciousness, actually moving us to deeper enthusiasm to serve God with love and devotion? And we can see that from Brahma's point of view, that the personalities in the universe who especially represent true religious principles, that's Narada and the four Kumaras.
Thank you, Prabhu. That was a delightfully satisfying answer. Thank you.
All right, Krishna.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
You mentioned the paramparas, they're synergistic, unlike political parties. I'm curious, do the different paramparas, do they have different philosophies or simply different practices within the same philosophy?
Okay. Thanks for that essay. The philosophies are simultaneously one and different. Okay. So, and because it can be a too easy catch-all. Like, oh, that's a Chintu Beta Beta Tattva. Okay, next question. And we can just answer everything by it's one and different. But I'll explain a bit more. So that, and your question, it's sort of responded to in the last sentence of the purport that we already looked at. So Prabhupada says, Lord Chaitanya's theory of Achintya Beta Beta Tattva is the perfect philosophy of the absolute truth. And so, okay. So from the time of Shankaracharya, let's say from about 500 AD till Lord Chaitanya appeared, which was about 1500 AD, these four prominent Vaishnavacharyas appeared. Ramanujacharya, Nimbarkacharya, Vishnu Swami, and Madhvacharya. And Shankaracharya, before them, he gave the Advaitavad. He gave the impersonal interpretation of the Vedas, that the ultimate goal is that undifferentiated oneness and we lose our personality and things like that. So the four Vaishnavacharyas, they progressively gave more and more complete philosophies till the fully complete philosophy of Achintya Beta Beta Tattva was revealed by Lord Chaitanya. So there's no contradiction between the different Vaishnava parampara philosophy. There's no contradiction, but there's relatively more or less completeness. So for example, okay, like Ramanujacharya's philosophy was called Vishishtadvad, Vishishtavad, okay. And he'll give analogies like, just like there's the whole body and there's the finger. So the finger is one with the body. The finger is part of the body, but it's not the whole body. The finger is meant to serve the body. Okay, that's there. At the same time, he didn't include as fully the achintya, the inconceivable part. Because let's say one, not shortcoming, but one aspect in which that analogy is incomplete is that, well, the finger is not a separate entity. The finger is not a separate conscious entity, okay? Whereas the spirit souls are separate conscious entities. So Lord Chaitanya, he gives, let's just say, fuller, more complete analogies that are not contradictory. Now, there are differences in practices which are, in some senses, they're a matter of flavor. Ramachandra was speaking last night about, like, in the Raman, from in South India, in Udupi. So there are some of the parampara, some of the sampradayas, they focus on worshiping Sitaram, serving Sitaram, not so much Radha Krishna. Some focus on serving Lakshmi Narayan, not so much Sitaram or Radha Krishna. And that's all wonderful. See, now, like if someone's serving a material demigod, okay, then that becomes a deviant philosophy that's not consistent with the Vedas. But it's all bona fide. It's all bona fide according to the Vedas. if we're worshiping truly transcendental personality, Sitaram, and Lakshmi Narayan, Radha Krishna. So there's some differences there, which is just, it's consistent, and there's different personal tastes. As far as philosophically, Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva is the most complete, and the other philosophies lead up to that. It was the different, not that the Vaishnavacharyas themselves were lacking in realization, but they were meeting people where they're at. Just like my understanding is Jesus wasn't lacking in any realization. He wasn't lacking in any realization of Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. He's a fully pure devotee. At the same time, he didn't give too much philosophy. He didn't give too much philosophy about what's the soul, what are the aspects of Godhead. He basically gave sattvic religious principles. He did give bhakti, but he didn't give too much philosophy because he was meeting the people in the desert at that time where they're at. Does that respond to your question?
Partially, because in your answer you were mentioning like the 4 Vaishnavacharyas that led up to Chaitanya, and my question was more oriented to like there's a parampara headed by the 4 Kumaras, like you just mentioned. I think maybe there's another one headed by Shiva.
And Lakshmi, yeah.
That we follow is headed by Brahma, and
Yeah.
then there's that I don't know, Lakshmi. So my question was between those, which my understanding is those are like the 4 Vaishnav paramparas that you mentioned are synergistic amongst themselves, and they're all, from my understanding, from what you've shared, they're all complete. They're not like the partial Visheshadvaita or.
I see. Yeah.
So my curiosity is if those have all the same philosophy, or if they follow, I don't know, maybe slightly different philosophies, like what differentiates them, if they all have like the ultimate goal of, yes, Krishna is the Supreme Personality, what makes them different?
Okay. There's some different emphasis. There's some different emphasis. Now, one thing, when I've talked about those 4 Vaishnavacharyas that appeared between 500 and 1500, each one is coming in a different one of the 4 sampradayas. Just so one of them's coming in the Kumara Sampradaya, one of them's coming in the Shiva Sampradaya, one of them's coming in the Lakshmi Sampradaya. Just there's a parallel there.
Mm-hmm.
And so for example, in the Sri Sampradaya, which comes through Ramanujacharya, 1200 years ago, whatever, there's descriptions of all sorts of energies of the Supreme that aren't emphasized so much in the teachings coming in the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya through Lord Chaitanya. There's descriptions of 16 energies, the Bhu, the Nila, like that. Prabhupada talks about them a little. So there's different emphases. There's different emphases on different aspects of the philosophy.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Azay.
Hare Krishna. It's Patrick, can you hear me?
Patrick, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So there's the idea, or maybe that kind of progressive revelation, or of that each, according to time, place, and circumstance, God or his representative comes and gives a further understanding of philosophy towards a completion. And Lord Chaitanya provided the final complete understanding of Vedanta. And then so that seems to indicate that at some point in prior history, the people were not ready for that conclusion. But then, at least from a linear perspective, it seems like, there's at some point in history where people were not ready for that realization. And then later on, more recently, then the people were ready for that realization. And that seems to go against like the progressive decline of Kali Yuga.
Okay.
So, like, how would it be that as we go further into Kali Yuga, things are more degraded, that people are more ready for, you know, the highest truth, like that?
Thanks for sharing that, Dr. Patrick. One thing is, it's definitely not linear, and I'll explain whatever understanding I have. It's not linear. And one thing is, there's always been Bhakti yogis practicing Achintya Beta Beta Tattva at all times, including on this planet. Sometimes it's been more or less dormant. It's been more or less dormant because like that. And so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he kind of revealed it. It wasn't something new, but he revealed it. And of course, Srila Prabhupada has brought it around the world, you know, the past 55 years. So it's not a linear thing as far as this receptivity. And Ramachandra quoted the verse last night, or it was in one of the books that you read. This is an important verse related to your question. Kalar doshik dine rajan astehiko mahad guna kirtanadeva krishnasya muktasanga ram vraja. That this age of Kali is an ocean of faults, but its one redeeming quality is that one achieves complete spiritual joy and liberation by chanting, by doing kirtana, Kirtana Deva Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. So this receptivity, it's not a linear thing. You know, there's like these very rigorous Vedic step-by-step processes. And Lord Chaitanya, through Srila Prabhupada, he's giving us an elevator rather than climbing 2,000 steps. So just like, okay, we're talking about religious principles in that text 12. Religious Sattvic principles. Okay, so Prabhupada was in India, where there was relatively, in the 1960s, relatively a lot of religious Sattvic principles, but there wasn't much receptivity. So then he went to the very, very degraded land. He went to New York City. He went, he went there where as far as Vedic religious principles and Sattvic living, it was unheard of. People with all these nasty habits, right? Nasty habits. So you could say, so from that linear point of view, going to the hippies and the greedy capitalists and like that, there's much less receptivity. But interestingly, in the rejection of the establishment, which basically led to just further ignorance. I mean, within the establishment, there was some regulated rajas. Okay, but in the hippie rejection of establishment, which basically led to just decadent ignorance, there was simultaneously an opening, more receptivity than the Vedic Brahmins of the 1960s or the 1860s or even the 1260s or the 860s. There was this receptivity amongst a certain percentage of them. So, so meeting us where we're at, a part of that is like other processes are just practically not practical. And so chant this Hare Krishna. It's the most recommended process for self-realization in this age. Chant Hare Krishna. And this realization of simultaneous oneness and difference, this realization of ourselves as spirit souls, will open up to you, however nasty your habits have been. Chant this, try to follow some regulative principles. Read Prabhupada's books, not just for internet, not just for intellectual philosophical knowledge, but to associate with the pure devotee and to associate with Brahma and the four Kumaras. And those who are ready to receive that, they get more profound realization than those who are stuck in Vedic rituals and might be at a much higher level of sattva in their practices. So it's not a linear thing. Let's just take someone coming from a Vedic Brahmin family and follows this and that, but has some rigid caste system idea. So in one way, they're just naturally vegetarian. They naturally have principles of cleanliness. They're not doing drugs, things like that. They're so much more elevated than the hippies Prabhupada went to. And in another sense, the hippies were more receptive to take an elevator to Krishna than the Vedic Brahmins. What do you think, Bhakti Patrick?
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Yeah, I appreciate that. The very present and modern day example of the 1960s India versus 1960s New York City, or even 1960s Vrindavan, I guess, versus 1960s New York City, and then maybe not Vrindavan, but at least India in general. And then because I was imagining, because that's common. That's also another. It's a universal principle. This progressive revelation that, and so it's not just a Hare Krishna thing or a Vaishnava thing. So it's a universal spiritual principle. So I was just appreciate that. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Patrick. Eze.
Yes, I'd like to follow up on what you said, David, in regards to your question, Patrick, that there's the simultaneous degrade of the Kali Yuga and then the simultaneous expansion of the Golden Age, starting with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance lasting 10,000 years. So there's the simultaneous degrade and also the rising of the Golden Age.
Thanks for that. Yeah. I think about 15 years ago, I wrote a short article that was published in Natural Awakenings magazine or Velocity magazine, kind of New Age magazine. And I entitled the article, An Eddy in the Current. And it's a metaphor for what, as I just described, the Kali Yuga gets more and more degraded. And at the same time, in that downward current, there's an eddy. Eddy is a stream of water that goes against the current. There's a 10,000-year growing eddy in the current. Or another analogy I use in that article, it's like there's an increasingly severe rainstorm. And at the same time, there's also an increasingly expanding umbrella. And so the rainstorm is the direction of Kali, and the umbrella is this golden age, the Sankirtan movement. And our choice is where we take shelter, false shelter in the rainstorm or within the umbrella of Prabhupada's movement.
Would you be able to forward the article to?
Yeah.
Because I was trying to envision what you were describing in your analogy for the last few years. But I think I asked that you when we met here the last summer, and Karma, the devotee from the archaeology department.
Dutta Yes. If I don't remember to do it, send me an email. Yeah. That's an important point, because the sattva can be a trap. We do what we do. It is part of our bhakti to cultivate sattvic principles. But that's what Prabhupada ran into in India. He would go door to door. Like, oh, you're such an intelligent and successful gentleman, so religious. You have 6 sons. Give one to Lord Chaitanya's movement. No way. No, I want all my sons to be lawyers and engineers and doctors like that. Okay, so sattvic. I think some of you are familiar. I've used the airport example. The airport represents sattva. But if we go to the airport, okay, yeah. So if I go to the airport, I'm closer to my destination to get to London. It's important to go to the airport to get to London. But then if they announce my plane and I just sit there because the music's so nice and I'm reading a nice book, and here's pleasant people and it's comfortable here. I'm in the VIP lounge. Well, and then I miss my plane. So the plane to London represents going to transcendence, to pure devotional service. So if we get too comfortable in sattva, because those in sattva generally there is more happiness, more peace. There can be a feeling of superiority. So in one sense, if I miss my plane, I'm no closer to London than I was at my home in Alachua, Florida, right? So, so that's like that. So then Prabhupada came to the United States and through all sorts of hardships, but then he found people receptive to give themselves 100% to the process, despite their very rajasic and tamasic degraded habits, because they were not in that sattvic trap. Again, I'll emphasize, we don't want to neglect cultivating sattvic habits, because sattva is, in a sense, the best platform to take to transcendence, to take to true bhakti.
Mm. I have something that I wanted to like, it really touched me when you said that in the beginning of the lecture, and I just wanted to highlight that and see maybe if you feel inspired kind of to extrapolate on that, because I found it so like softening my heart when you reflected that how to connect to this mood of separation, that's actually the bhakti, the process of connecting to God. Specifically used the word separation. And it was really touching, that illuminating that, oh, this is what bhakti is about. It's not like, I think Bhakti Siddhanta, he says, don't do something so God
so you can see God.
So you can see God, but
act in a way that God will want to see you.
Yeah, it's really like helps me to dive into this mood.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I use the word bridge. I don't know that
Bridge.
I don't know that more to expand, but I'm moved that your heart was moved by that. That yeah, we are eternally separate persons from Krishna, and to feel that separation and let that move us to serve Krishna with love and devotion. Because Bhakti Siddhanta is not saying, I want to be important so God sees me, but he's really talking to the sahajya, mentality, that like, last night I saw Krishna in the bushes, like that.
He's still man.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about it, but what can I say? I have such ecstasy from this whole sahajya mentality. So Bhaktisiddhanta's work, give yourself in a grounded way, such that God and God's pure representative, that they'll notice you. Not that we do it to be noticed, but let's act in such a way that like, yes, today I gave myself to expand the Sankirtan movement, and I gave 2 hours to chanting the names of God. Act in such a way that Krishna will want to notice us.
Yeah. Maybe it means even Krishna will not notice us, but it's just like this act of doing. That's kind of what I sense from what you said, the act of doing something for God out of this intense feeling of I am separated from God in a way. Like, because you mentioned that after your experience with the Jewish tradition. Yeah, it's like every tradition experienced that in a different way, but then Lord Chaitanya, he completes that emotion of separation in such a intimate way.
Yeah, and Cyril made a comment on the chat, and through sattva, there's the danger of getting attached to happiness. Queen Kunti prayed, Jan me shraya shrutashri vir edaman madakuman naivarhat yavidak tumbai tvama kinchana gochara. She says, Krishna, tvama kinchana gochara, you are the shelter for the materially exhausted. And if one has riches, material beauty, aristocratic birth, high education, then there's the danger of getting attached to that, and that can prevent us from calling out to Krishna, serving with a transcendentally desperate mood. Of course, material exhaustion, someone could have $10 billion and be materially exhausted and get like, this is not my happiness. And at the same time, someone could be poverty stricken and not materially exhausted. So it's not like a direct linear correlation here. Still, Queen Kunti is pointing to the idea that if we have material assets, then we might not feel that. Just even in this time of the isolation and the quarantine, I'm noticing more people, because they're limited, and more people are becoming more introspective. they're going towards an internal life of self-realization, contemplation, God consciousness. Also in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Shrimatam Suchinam Shrimatam Gehe Yoga Brashta Vijayate. Krishna gives the other side of the conversation from Queen Kunti. Krishna says that one who does some devotional service, one who is, yes, thanks for that clarification from Bhakti Yoga Retreat. Thank you. Yeah, Krishna says that one who makes advancement but doesn't complete their process to pure devotion might take birth in a wealthy family. So we go, so that's dangerous because most wealthy people we see, well, they're not getting they're not getting intense to serve God. But the idea and principle is you're born in a wealthy family. It means you don't need to just work 60 hours per week to pay the bills. So you have more time for what's really important in life, God consciousness.
I have a comment.
Riel.
It's interesting that in the mood of separation, the love becomes more personal.
Thanks for that. Yeah, like in that separation, which on the surface of it, we can think that creates a separation of personalism. But then the love, the devotion, the service takes on a deeper personal connection and affection. Thanks for sharing that.
I have a follow-up comment on that from something I was reading in the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam yesterday, referring to when several times that Ram was separated from Sita. I read that spiritual separation is still experienced as transcendental bliss. It reminds me of what you just shared, Brielle, that it increases personal connection, how it's still spiritually it's experienced as bliss, transcendental bliss.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and that's so much the mood of our parampara, that mode of service and separation, and that's spiritual separation is imbued with transcendental bliss. Thanks for sharing that. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Hare Rama.